Another one of my favorite painting lessons involves me drawing like a kindergarten kid. I'm going to draw some grass. Okay, this is some nice grass. Oh, here's the sun up here with some nice radiating sun rays with a smile. I can't forget the smile. And then there's going to be a tree in this scene, and a tree has a trunk that looks like this. Of course, let's erase out the grass behind the trunk. And then the tree has some nice foliage that looks like this, with some nice swirls in there. Okay, there's my beautiful drawing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the principles of color apply and how you can turn even this piece of garbage into something that actually has viable color information. And of course, this is a springboard off the study we just did. I'm going to be applying some of that theory to this. Now, the first thing we do when we're painting our own picture is to consider what's called local color. And just to provide you a quick definition, local color is the inherent color of an object. So like how a red apple is red, okay? It's using that useless color term, like I said before, red, orange, blue, whatever it is, right? Like the local color of the sky is blue. So let's pick a blue, and I don't even care which blue. Again, I'm in kindergarten right now. I only have Crayola crayons in front of me. So I picked my Crayola crayon blue mindlessly, and I am painting in the sky. I'm actually not even painting, I'm coloring. Make sure I get this side in as well. Okay, good. And now, what color is the sun? Well, the sun we've already talked about is kind of like this yellow. So I'm going to paint right over my smiley face. I'm going to paint my yellow sun. These are local colors. These are what we know are meaningless. But when you start a painting on your own, sometimes you do have to start from this kind of very prosaic sense of color, just local colors, you know, brown, red, green, whatever it is. But you'll see how soon we stray from this. But for now, let me stay in kindergarten, because being in kindergarten is fun because you have no responsibilities. So I'm going to just paint my nice colors. Okay, what color is the grass? Green. I'm going to pick my Crayola green and color in my nice grass. Of course, let's color in the lines, because we're in kindergarten, and that's important when you're in kindergarten. And we make some nice grassy strokes, and we have our grass. Oh, guess what? This green can also be used up here for the foliage, because trees are green too, right? And one more thing to fill in, the tree trunk, and everyone knows that tree trunks are brown. So we get a brown crayon, and we color in our tree. Okay, the picture I've made looks exactly like something drawn by a 4-year-old. Believe it or not, we're actually on our way to a good painting. We're nowhere near there yet, but this actually is a viable first stage. So we're ready for the next step, and this is where we part ways from our kindergarten child selves and actually put on a painter's cap. We have to start thinking about values and light. But I'm also going to now think about the lesson I just did with color and think about which direction on the color wheel are my colors going to travel. First question, what is the light source? It's the sun. The sun is shining in this way. Okay, we're painting sunlight again. That means that in light, the sun is the bully. So in light, all of these local colors, the green, the brown, well, there's only two, green and brown. The sun is the bully, so the sun is going to take the local color, and there's only two in this case, the brown and the green, and it's going to bully it to be more like it, both in terms of its hue, the direction it's traveling on the color wheel, and also the saturation up here. Let's start with the tree foliage. Here's my local color. Okay, now if you notice, it's kind of nearing the middle of green. I would call this a cooler green because I see some influence of blue in this green. You know, if I just keep going up, you'll notice that this green is kind of on the tipping point to kind of a turquoisey blue. So I would call this green that we have down here a cool green. The sun, being a warmer, warm color, is going to warm up this green. So this green is going to travel on the color wheel down this way, just like we saw in our previous study of color, right? And the value is going to be light, so I'll make the value like this, maybe a little lighter. And I'm going to paint this green. I'm going to apply this green into whatever the sun hits. In my fence line of light and shadow, which I have in my head, let's just make it simple. Let's just make it like this. Make it very simple. I'm And I'm just going to apply that green. Okay, now I'm not done with this yet. I need to think of the shadow family now. Well, the shadow family is going to travel in the opposite direction because it's influenced by a cooler light, right? It's influenced by the sky. It's influenced by bounced light coming off of the ground, for example. It's also going to be darker in value. So I'm going to get the value down, which would be first and foremost. I don't care about color yet. I'm just going to put my value down here somewhere. So I'm going to go dark, and I'm also just going to go a little up toward the cooler side. And I'm going to apply that. And let's just see what that does. Let's see what that gives us. I'm going to paint right up to my fence line. You notice I'm using a little bit of the Wacom transparency. I'm not trying to create interesting blending or anything. I just have a basic brush out. Okay, so now we've split our local color. We've deviated from our local color. We're no longer in local color now. Now we're in terms of light. We're thinking about values, and we're thinking about applying warm temperatures and cool temperatures to the light and shadow family. This is kind of step one. Now, let's think about halftone in this tree. Halftone is right here, where the form is turning away from the light, but is still in light. Now, if a form is turning away from the bully's not going to be able to bully it as much. But because halftone is still in the light, the bully still influences it. So I'm still going to be in the warm greens, but I'm allowed maybe to sneak back my local color just a little bit. Get a little more green in there rather than my yellowy green. And that halftone is going to help me transition, of course, into shadow. That's the value part of it, right? I am purposely drawing terribly here because I want you to focus on the color application. Now, I can further separate my light from my average light from my halftone in color by even making my average light even warmer, maybe even yellower. Maybe that sun is bullying it so much that it's actually making the greens fairly yellow. And you'll notice that my tree still looks green, even though I'm painting yellow here, because the reason it still looks green and can identify as green leaves is because I have enough varieties of green from warm in the light, and then in the shadow I have a cooler green. I have enough of a span of green that our brain still understands this is a green object, okay? Like I haven't strayed too far. Like it would be a mistake. I would have gone too far if I did this. Like if I painted red, that's just doesn't make sense because the sun would not bully the colors to red. The sun is not red. The sun is yellowy orange in this case. So the sun is simply going to take those greens and pull it to that. Okay, so we're going to have a very orangey or a very yellowy looking green. And you see, like I can put different kinds of temperatures in my green. Some of it might be more yellow. Some of it might be more in the greens, and the orangey greens, yellowy greens, you know. I can play in this area. And you'll see this is how we get an interesting kind of tapestry, or we begin to get an interesting tapestry of color, because I'm thinking in terms of temperature. I don't care exactly which green I'm in. As long as I'm in the warmer greens, I'm okay. I'm appropriately in the warm family of green. Now let's think about, oh, actually, you know what? Let's do the same calculation to the trunk. So let's start with the shadows this time, because actually often I do start with shadows. So the shadow is going to be a cooler shadow, right? So we sample our local color, and to make it cooler, I can either go this way, but that's no good because that is going toward the bully. I want to go away from the bully. So let's go away, and then let's go darker for our value, and let's paint that in. There's going to be a cast shadow from the tree. It's going to make this cool pattern, but I'm not trying to make a nice drawing here, guys, so I'm going to ignore any kind of subtle drawing. I'm going to make it more something we can all achieve. It doesn't matter how good a 10-year-old could draw this. That's my point, okay? And actually I have taught 10-year-olds art and color and done exactly this, and they all get it. This is the magic of this kind of demo, is I've stripped away good drawing from the process and left us just with basic raw information, okay? So we now have our cooler shadow. Now let's take our trunk color and do the light. So the bully, the sun, is going to influence it to go this way, and of course it's going to get lighter because it's in sunlight, and it's going to have this warmer brown. And I'm just going to paint that in. You know, maybe I'll leave behind our local color as a bit of halftone. I'll leave that behind because it's a slightly darker value now. And it's also, you know, slightly more in the local color. Well, it is the local color, so I'll kind of leave that behind. So again, halftone is where local color reveals itself a little more readily. And again, let's just play around with these families. Because I'm in warm light here, let's, you know, let's see what happens if I'm a little more saturated orange. You can mix these, right? You can play a little bit. Maybe I'm in average light now. Let's go a little more yellow. Using the smudge tool to help me with some edges. Again, I'm not really thinking edges in this demo, but just for fun, I'm using the smudge tool. Let's work this halftone, maybe even a little more orange, a little more brown as it works its way into the shadow. You notice I'm working that halftone into shadow. Okay, and let's do one last thing. Let's take our grass. We can just sample, let's just sample the tree and put the light of the grass here. Same calculation, right? I don't have to explain it again. Cooler shadow, right? A cooler green. And we're just gonna paint in the shadow cast by this tree. And I'm just gonna make a very rough shape here. I'm not trying to draw well. So we are definitely far away from what a kindergarten kid could do. A kindergarten kid could not do this. There's too much thought now, but we're still not done. We haven't considered our shadows anywhere further than average shadow. I've only got average shadow in here. In my light, I've got some nice values. In fact, if I wanted a highlight, maybe I could even find a highlight, which is a direct reflection of the light source, right? So I'm gonna get like the exact sun color almost. And you know, this is not quite how bark would work in light, but let's just make a highlight just to show you guys how I can put my values there. And I can even take my tree. This is gonna make my tree look more like chrome, but that's okay. Now in shadow, we want to think about reflected light in shadow. Now, we know from our previous experience here that the sky is largely going to be responsible for reflected light. And the sky is going to influence anything that's open to it. And when I say open to it, I mean like what forms face the sky. And it's like this area in here kind of all faces the sky, right? It's pointing up, basically. So the sky is going to hit it. Now, where the sky wouldn't hit, this area in here, not so much, right? Because this area is tucking under the tree. It's not open to the sky, this area. So here's where we might get a dark accent. I'll talk about that a bit later. But maybe this area might get light from the sky because it's open to it. Certainly this area here is open to the sky, the shadow. So it's going to get some skylight. So let's deal with the sky fill first. Now this is all termed reflected light. I like to call this reflected light. So what I do is I get my average shadow, which is already a cooler green, put myself in the ballpark. And if you remember from values, reflected light lightens your values just a bit. And also because it's coming from the sky, I'm allowed to go really into the blues. Think of the demonstration or the study we just did from the photograph. Think of how blue that road was, okay? If you think of concrete, you don't necessarily think it's blue, but in shadow, it certainly was blue. We saw it in a photograph. So I'm painting this blue reflected light from the sky into my tree, okay? And again, I'm just kind of putting it in the areas that I think are most open to receiving light from the sky. And I'll do the same thing with my trunk here. Now my trunk is like this cooler version of brown, right? So I don't want to go blue. It's too much of a jump. But maybe I'll go towards blue. I'll continue towards blue and I'll go up a little bit. And maybe the blue of the sky mixed with the temperature of my trunk shadow gives me more of a purpley thing. Maybe let's see if I can sneak in even more toward blue and see what that does. I'm playing around. There's no right and wrong, guys. And this brings up that question, what color should I choose? There is no one color you should choose. There is no right color for the shadow here, for the reflected light. It's simply a calculation of that blue sky entering into this temperature that we've established for our average shadow. We've established that it's a cooler brown, and now that cooler brown is going to get even cooler as the sky comes into play, right? So what color should I choose? Well, it's a calculation. It's that sky entering into a realm of cooler brown. How is that sky going to influence this temperature? How is that blue of the sky going to look against this green? Well, it's probably going to be a lot more blue because green is closer to blue. So as that green slides into blue, there's less of a barrier for it to enter into blue. So there's going to be more blue. You can see how my kindergarten example is starting to get layered and complex, right? Whereas in the trunk, maybe that blue produces more of a purple. Or maybe let's try getting into some actual blues and see if we can sneak some of them in. That's fun. It's fun when you can do that. Let's do the cast shadow very quickly. Same calculation, the blue of the sky. Let's talk dark accent. Dark accent's going to go where one form and another form meet, kind of forming a crevice. And here's a color rule. Dark accents are always warm. So when I do a dark accent, I've got my multiply airbrush out. I'm going to pick a warm color like that. And with my multiply brush, I'm just going to just spill that dark accent kind of over both of these forms. And I'll do the same where the tree trunk meets the ground. Getting a nice warm dark accent. I don't know why dark accents are always warm, but in nature, they pretty much are. In fact, I kind of call it a painting rule. Keep your dark accents warm. Now look at this. I mean, there's not much in the way of good drawing here, but I've got some decent colors here. The only other thing I want to show you is how you can actually have some green bounce light coming into the trunk. So if like sun is coming in this way, as we know, it's going to hit that grass and actually bounce up into this part of the trunk. And I've neglected to do that so far. So I can sample where I'm at and maybe go into the greens and just subtly paint in some of this green. Okay, you get the idea. See how I see how it's really evolved into a tapestry of color now? Really interesting, fun stuff you get to do as a painter. I love doing this. And just like that, we have our final. We took a simplified kindergarten level drawing like this and actually added some sophistication to it. So I'd like to now tie in that demonstration back in with our swatch study and show you how I study from photographs using this information. So this is just a quick color study. And what I love about these color studies is, first of all, the canvas is very small. That's probably about a 600 pixel canvas. And you do not really need to draw well. You can just do the very basic amount of drawing, and you can still do a very convincing replication of the color. Now, I'm not sampling from the photograph. I'm trying to remember what I've learned from sampling that photograph. So you can see, as you remember, there are warm lights in the light and cooler color temperatures in the shadow. So I'm kind of putting myself in that ballpark. Hopefully you can get a sense of that. How I begin is giving myself kind of a quick comparison of warm temperatures versus cool. So you can see I've blocked in the kind of the big shadow area, and now I'm working a little more in depth into the light and expanding my context of color temperatures that are in this painting. Again, it doesn't matter what the exact color is. I don't need to sample from the photo. All I need to do is get the relationships right, getting myself in the appropriate category of either warmth or coolness. And we're going to keep dialing into that so we can further our understanding of it. But this is a good photo to study from because it's a very generic separation of warm and cool. So I'm just blocking in some big shapes. That's the other thing I like about this photo. It's got a lot of big shapes, not a whole lot of small things that can trip you up. So just blocking in some, of course, the shadow on the cliff in light. It's still going to be a cooler temperature, right? And just blocking in, there's a lot of greenery, which means I can play a lot with different kinds of green. Of course, when it's in the light, they're all going to be greens that veer towards the warm side, the yellow side. And in shadows, you can see I've actually already really pushed those greens to be closer to blue. I like to push the difference. That's another thing you can do when you're studying from a photo to really understand it. Try and push it even further than the photo actually is. But push it in the direction that the photo's already going, you know? That's something that you can actually observe better from life. Your eyes register this a little more truly than photos do. But of course, we can't paint from life. This is online, so I have to use photos. I have a few different texture brushes that I keep going to. Probably the same 3 or 4 brushes I'll use all the time. And they just give me some unpredictable patterns, different edges, and just helps me create quicker. You know, if I just use like a round brush, I'd have to do too much editing, but a lot of different brushes give me different shapes and different kind of edge and just keep the interest going. So, you know, anything I'm doing here should not come as any shock to anyone. It's like right now I'm in half tone. That's shadow actually right there. So this is still a bit of half tone, bit of shadow. Here's some average light coming in for the trees. This is some red rooftops. I'm just improvising a little bit here. There's a little red in the photo, but I wanted to just bring it out a little more in my study, just for fun. Again, this is not a quote-unquote good drawing. It's just very basic blocks of shape. But in the end, that's actually what a painting is. Of course, you can refine from here, but this is just a quick study. This is not meant for refinement. It's just meant to test what I think I've learned. Here's some just a little lighter bit of leaves coming in. I don't know. I wouldn't call that a highlight. I'd call it just a emphasis of the average light value. Getting in some yellower green just to really push the influence of the sun there. And just a few tree branches picking a warm light. Now I'm back in shadow. This is reflected light. So reflected light is a little lighter, and because it's coming from the sky a lot in this case, it's very blue. You can see a lot of I'm really in the blues. I'm in the purples now. Or this is dark accent here with the airbrush, just helping route one surface to another. Just getting those crevices wherever there's a crevice underneath the trees or underneath where the wall hits the street. Just like that, I'm back into, average light here, just refining shapes, because you're always dealing with shapes, right? Even though my shapes are blobby and just blocked in, I still want to make an attempt at good shapes, even though I might not have time to do total refinement. Here's the little cars coming in. Reflected light makes their tops bluer. I'm just selecting out the shadow, and I'm just going to do a quick brightness contrast just to darken the shadows just a bit, just to separate my values. It helps punch it out. See that? It really helped. And just like that, we have our finish. It really doesn't take much to quickly grab a photo and do a quick study from it. And just for the occasion, I wanted to show you how I actually took this very photo and arrived at something more finished from it. This is a painting I did back in, I think, 2010 or 2009. It was quite a few years ago now, but you can see how the lighting and the information are very closely aligned with what we saw in that photo. And this photo was actually the inspiration for this painting. As far as I'm concerned, there's really no difference between this painting and my study, except for that this painting is just more finished in terms of shape refinement and edge refinement. But in terms of color, all the information in this painting is still contained in my little study.